Welcome to the Rising for Women podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Merlo-Booth, and I believe the world will be changed for women when we change how we walk in it. So each week, we're going to have hard conversations. We're going to explore new options. Some of them are going to be hard options, and we're going to have some real, straight talk. We're going to do that because I have faith that women can handle it. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Rising for Women podcast. I'm Lisa Merlo-Booth, your host, and with me are Arlene Newman and Dee Marcotte. Welcome, guys.
Hey.
Once again.
Hi.
So Dee, Arlene, and I have worked with couples for decades now. And one of the things that we have been seeing is we're seeing a lot of men losing their marriages, losing their relationships, struggling with friendships. And today we're gonna switch things around. Today's podcast is a podcast for men. So for all you wives, mothers, sisters, aunts out there who are watching the men in your lives struggle in their relationships and you think that they could use a little boost, send them to this podcast. So let's talk a little bit. Before we get into what we're seeing men doing that's wrong, right? Which is where we start with all the women. Let's just start first by talking about why we wanted to do this podcast. What are we seeing? Why are we feeling so bad for men?
Well, first off, I like what you said. We're feeling bad for men. And so I think that's an important thing. This isn't like a finger pointing exercise. This is about, we have empathy for the struggle that you're in and how often somebody in your life, whatever woman that happens to be, says, you're not listening, you're not here, you're not connecting, like a variety of things. And in my practice, the men doing more of the same thing they were doing before that shot them in the foot, and really don't know where to go. And sometimes don't even know what they're doing.
And don't really understand what it is that their partners are talking about. They don't really get it. They think that they're doing everything right, at least from their perspective, and it doesn't work, and then they're baffled and they just shut down even more.
Yeah. And what I've seen that has really been sad is they have no idea how to show up relationally, many of them. And many of the men in my office are like, they want to save their marriage. They do, but they don't get it. They don't know how to shift. They're, having to fight just, a millennium of, of men, of teachings that our culture are doing to men. And it's very hard for them. I'm also watching, and this thing, and I think I've said this on past podcasts, that's been really sad. Many of the men that I've come across over the years, their main go-to person was their wives.
It's true.
And so when they lose their wives, they don't have very many friends. They don't have other women in their lives that they're talking to. Their children, they're not very connected with their children. And it's just sad. It's really sad. And so after watching that, it was like, wait a second, and I don't see a lot of things to men. There's so many things out there available to women. And so, we thought, let's just do a quick podcast for men. We'll do an episode and just try to help the men. This is what we're seeing. This is where we think you're messing up. This is where you're getting into trouble. This is how you get yourself out of it. Men, what you do with it, you do with it. You can dismiss us because we're three women and you can dismiss us, which is your prerogative, and hopefully you'll take it in. Because I think 75% of divorces are initiated by women. And first marriages are 50%, 50% of first marriages end in divorce, 62% of second marriages, and 4% of third marriages end in divorce. So leaving this wife for the next one isn't necessarily going to get you. So let's talk. The first question is, what are men doing that's harming them? And so we are going to tie this down to the 5 main things that we see in our practices again and again and again and again. Let's talk about the 5 main things. So Dee, what's one of the ones that you're seeing all the time?
Well, I think one of the ones that everyone comes in with is communication. You know, what is it that you want while you're here in therapy? We don't communicate, you know, and I think that that takes many different forms of not communicating. Most of the time, it's, especially women in men's relationships, the idea of you're not talking like at all.
Yeah, I'm
or
lonely.
if you are talking, you're just fixing.
Yeah.
You're not listening.
Right. I think that's the main thing. You're not listening. I think we should break down the communication part, and that would be one of them. Not listening.
Now, men will say, so for all you men out there who are thinking, oh my God, what is this about? I've heard this 1,000 times. I'm listening. It doesn't mean you could repeat back what she said, right? Sometimes men are like, well, I heard you. I heard you. I know. I know. So Arlene, what do you mean by listening?
I mean, really taking in where the other person is at, really understanding what they're trying to say, not just hearing the words, but really getting the meaning of what's behind the words, getting a sense of where they are, and not stopping to listen until you get it, until you really get it, and they know that you got it.
Okay, awesome. So one of the parts is communication and not listening. Another aspect of communication, Dee, you said where they're not talking. I like literally sometimes in my office, she'll say something and he's like a deer in the headlight. He just stares at her. He's frozen. And I was like, did you hear her? He's like, yes. I'm like, why aren't you responding? He's like, well, I'm right here. And I'm like, no. So literally they're not communicating. They're in the same home, they're in the same room, but there's like little to no communication.
Even to the extent, I had a couple where the woman was saying, well, like this basic respect or just kindness.
Yeah.
She would come home from being out for a while. So this isn't like, oh, I went to the mailbox and came back.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't acknowledge that she came home at all. Like there was no even hello.
Oh, right.
Or anything like that. And that idea of like, well, why do I need to say hello? She lives with me. You know, like that's the reason that you need to say hello, because she lives with you. And it's called basic kindness kind of thing.
Great. Awesome. Okay.
Or the other piece is that I'm speaking, but kind of a little bit of on the idea of what Arlene was saying. I'm speaking about me, what I think you should do, what I think about it, my opinion, my whatever. And I'm not taking into account what the impact of that might be on you at all.
So meaning men, so when the women are talking about themselves, the men are making it about them.
Yes.
They're not really, okay. So that's one of the other things that they do with communication. Instead of really trying to get into her story, they're just making it about their story and, you know, what's going on for them. Yeah, that's not going to help. That's going to be frustrating for if you're, you know, anybody in your life, but that's going to be frustrating for a partner if when they're talking, you kind of somehow make that about you or you take it over and then now it becomes your story in some way.
I thought the other piece that you were saying was that there is lack of awareness of the impact of what you're saying on the other person.
Yes.
Mhm.
That you're so focused on what you're saying, whether it's fixing or whatever it is, that you're not also aware that you're talking to another person, that you want to
Mhm.
receive what you're saying, and you're not at all thinking about that. So you're completely absorbed in your own story.
Mhm. Mhm.
Great. Okay, so communication, that's a big kind of grouping. Another one of the 5 is, Arlene, you want to take the next one? What's another one of the 5 tops?
Dismissiveness.
Oh, I
And
see this all the time.
in a million and one ways, overt and covert,
Yeah.
Mhm.
where you hear and you don't really want to deal. The man, you don't want to deal with what is being said. You don't know what you're talking about. You're too sensitive. You shouldn't worry about that, honey.
Yeah.
There are a million and one ways.
You
Sometimes
shouldn't
it's
feel that
done.
way.
You shouldn't feel that way. It doesn't make any sense. They may not say it doesn't make any sense, but they act as if it doesn't make any sense. And they present a rash. There are so many ways. I think we could be here till tomorrow listing all the different overt and covert ways in which dismissal goes on. And very often women, when it's covert and subtle, they don't even realize it's happening. They go, oh yeah, right. Yes, maybe I am being too sensitive. Yeah, right. Doesn't make any sense. And they go along with it. So it's very deadly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Nobody likes to be dismissed, right? And so when you're doing that, it's really tough for your partner. It gets old after a while. That dismissiveness comes from, what I see often is, well, if it wouldn't bother me, it shouldn't bother you. Or if I don't think it's important, why do you think it's important? And so all of that is, plays into dismissiveness.
Right. But also, I could say that when you live inside yourself in a place where you're not so in touch with your feelings, and you don't really feel the things that your wife may be feeling, then it's easy to dismiss it because you are not, you you don't experience what she's experiencing. You're cut off from that level of experiencing.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things I see women do is they're so used to being dismissed that then what women do is they ramp up and they start yelling and screaming, or they get really, really big, and they'll say, but that's the only way he'll hear me. Right. And then
Yes,
when
I
that
hear that a
happens,
lot.
yeah. And then he'll dismiss her more because he's like, oh, she's just getting crazy. And so you can see that dynamic play out. I also see dismissiveness play out a lot with anxiety. If the woman is anxious, the man just kind of dismisses everything. She never has a reason to be nervous about anything, And so I see that play out as well. So, all right, another one. I'll take on this one. Bullying and intimidation. I see a lot of men who move in power over women a lot, and they get intense and intimidating, and they can be yelling or do that quick, harsh, thing where the women immediately back down, or it can be a look, or it can just be like an energy, which is don't mess with me. Right. And, the women start to walk on eggshells around them. The children walk around on eggshells around them, and you become the big bully in your home. And that is killing marriages. It's just killing relationships. And I'm not talking about any physical abuse. That's a whole different extreme. That's a whole different ball of wax. I'm talking about emotional, where you come in hot, you come in quick, and you are intense, and you kind of demand, you shut conversations down, you shut the topic, you decide how things are going to go, and you enter the home with this energy that everybody in your house is kind of shying away from.
So you may feel that you're in control and you're controlling the situation, but it leaves you very alone.
Yeah.
And everyone else afraid of you.
And everybody else afraid. And distance.
I think the other piece that you were talking about, Lisa, is that you can bully without bullying words.
Yes.
Like I had this guy one time, and he said, you know, I said, he was like, I haven't been angry and bullying like for the 2 weeks since we've seen you. I'm like, oh, and then we go on with this session, and it's kind of like his energy is like,
Yeah.
you know, and so I'm kind of like, hold on, wait a minute. I thought you said you weren't angry. Well, he thought he wasn't bullying because he wasn't saying the things he was saying before. But his whole, like, it was very obvious, like, you are pissed as hell here, you know, kind of thing. So I really want men to understand that this can just be because of the energy, and when they let that sense of anger come up rather than really paying attention, that's gonna feel like bullying also.
Well, and what's interesting, I don't know, I'm sure you guys have seen this, but the bullying and dismissiveness go together. Oh my God, you're too sensitive. Get over it. You're, you know, like, this is how I talk. This is just me. I'm not, you know, why are you so afraid? No.
Right. You shouldn't be afraid of me. It's like,
you shouldn't be afraid of you. Right. If people are afraid of you, then your volume control is off. You think you're at a 2 and the world is like, what the hell? So don't dismiss your wife because, or your partner, because she's or he is telling you that you're too intense. If somebody's telling you you're too intense, guess what? You're too intense. Slow it down, lower it, lower that energy. Okay. So we have bullying, communication is a problem, dismissiveness. Who wants to take? We got 2 more.
So I'll take on the struggle with intimacy. And we want to be really, really clear that intimacy is very broad. It has to do with in-to-me-see, which means I'm sharing my thoughts, my dreams, my hopes, myself, my emotions. And so it's a very broad thing. It's not sex.
Yeah. Well, and it can, like, sex can be one aspect of intimacy.
Right.
I'm even finding that with sex, men aren't very intimate. Right?
Yeah.
So
sex doesn't mean intimacy, right? You can have very unintimate sex.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if, you know, if you're having sex with your wife and you're like, you know, oh, great, now I physically feel fine. And she's like, I didn't feel connected at all. I wasn't even, you know, like, I wasn't even there. Like, that's not intimate. That's just, you know, a biological function that is happening. And even though you're being sexual and you're feeling closer, your wife literally could be feeling more and more distant from you as a result of that sex. Right?
And that the idea that and I think this is a part of something that happens, the difference in male culture and female culture, but for men, I think they have learned a split between intimacy and sex.
Yes.
And so this is unlearning that split and now learning how to put it together, because there's intimacy in the bedroom during sex, and there's the idea of intimacy outside of the bedroom. And both need to occur for there to be intimacy.
Right.
In all areas, not just this one aspect.
Right. So that all interactions should have into me see idea.
Great. I like that.
Yeah. And intimacy in communication is you are actually joining them in their experience. Intimacy is you're coming home and you're sharing, like, you know, what happened in your day, and not just what happened, but what did you feel about it? Like, you know, you had this meeting at the office and it went horrible, and, you know, what's going on? COVID. Oh, I'm worried about our, you know, our company's going to close, or I'm, you know, I'm struggling to try to, you know, bring in more money when we can't open our restaurant, whatever it is. And so you start sharing and you see your spouse male or female, whoever you're married to, like you see them as an equal partner who can hold the support with you and who can be there through that, that experience. It's not, living with somebody isn't intimate. Just being in the same room with somebody is not intimate.
I think also that men have to get the idea that sharing experience is tremendously bonding.
Yes.
That's why it's so important to ask the question, like, what was that like for you when you went through whatever? When you went to this meeting that didn't go well, or you're worrying, what are you going through? How does it affect you? What is it making you think about or feel like? That really, like, inviting the sharing of experience. And I don't know that men think about how valuable it is for them, that they value their own experience. So it makes it hard for them to value their partner's experience. But I think that's a huge piece of what makes people drift apart.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that was interesting was I have lots of men who are kind of like, well, it was a day. I didn't have a feeling about the meeting. I didn't have a feeling about, and I'm like, well, actually you did. You just learned how not to pay attention to it.
That's right.
And so
That's
I have
important.
them like check in, like that little timer goes off on their phone that says, how did you feel about whatever happened, and they bring up their little feeling wheel to kind of determine what that might be. And, what was that like, and that kind of thing. And they're usually amazed.
Yeah.
Like, I had no idea all that was going on there in the background. Right. So like you're saying,
they live on one floor in their house.
Right. Yeah.
And then,
it's kind of like good for you and them.
Right. So when they're not, this is all the issues where they're kind of harming their relationships and harming connections. When you're not sharing about things, it gets lonely in the home with you. It gets lonely in the home. And even though it's not lonely for you, because I hear many men are like, I'm fine. If I'm in the house, we don't need to talk. I'm okay. It's not fine for your partner, and in particular for female partners. Okay. And the last one is defensiveness / accountability, lack of accountability. What I see in marriages with men, oh my goodness, they really have a hard time saying, you're right, I did that, I'm sorry, my bad. Like copping to it is like it's very, very difficult. And I wouldn't say just men, however, a lot of men struggle with this. And it can be for many reasons. It could be, because of perfectionism, because you were going to get decked when you were a kid. And so you learn not to, own anything. It could be because it's not quote unquote tough, right? You don't want to do it.
Right. It's seen as a weakness. I'm showing my vulnerability.
Right.
Not going there.
Donald
it's going to get
Trump
used
right
against
now.
me.
Yeah, we have a president right now who, for the life of him, cannot admit anything. And so here's the thing, men, about defensiveness and lack of accountability. What you're teaching your partners, if you are unable to be accountable and you are consistently defensive, the underlying message to that is, I'm not changing. I am who I am. Not only am I not going to change, I can't even hear you're upset because I get so defensive and angry about it. So just leave me alone. Well, you do that, what's going to happen is the women in your lives and the partners in your lives, they're going to leave you alone. And they're going to go on and on and on until one day they're not anymore. And one day they're going to be like, I'm done. You're not going to change. I'm tired of talking to you about it. You keep getting defensive about it, and I'm done. And the other thing around defensiveness is, just because you say you didn't do it and just because you defend against it doesn't fool the other person into thinking that, oh, you didn't do that. They just think you're not strong enough to be able to handle the feedback. So they kind of write you off. So that's,
or they feel dismissed, because you're not hearing them. And then they go away and they're still angry and they still feel unheard and they turn away. And ultimately they walk away.
Right.
I think another piece is the idea of of what part did you do or didn't you do, sort of thing. So it may be that your partner or whoever says, you know, you didn't take out the garbage and you did that because blah, blah, blah. You know, it's like, don't pay attention to the blah, blah, blah part, which is usually where you go. Did you take the garbage out or not? If you didn't, it's like, you're right, I didn't take the garbage out.
I'm sorry.
And I get a lot of, but then they're going to think, you know, that I really did it for that reason. I'm like, they're going to think that whether you defend or not. And the more you defend, the more they're going to think that.
Yeah.
So it's really a losing strategy
Yeah.
to pretend you could convince them otherwise. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's go to, so here are the 5, just to summarize: defensiveness, lack of accountability, dismissiveness, struggle with intimacy, communication, and bullying.
Intimidation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So why are men doing this?
Because they can't be vulnerable. They've been taught that being vulnerable is a weakness, and they feel it would be too shameful and exposing. I think that's one big reason.
Yeah, the only thing I would change about that is they can be vulnerable. They don't like to be vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
They can be, but they feel the price is too high. It's too threatening.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I totally agree. And the piece where they've been taught this, I feel like our culture has set these men up to experience tremendous pain and loneliness. We have stomped it out of boys from the, you know, from the day they're born. We're telling them to be tough. Look how strong he is. I've had parents show me a little, like literally a 2-week-old with a football shirt on saying, "Doesn't he look tough?" And I'm like, no. He looks like a beautiful little baby. Like, and so it has been stomped out of them. And the messages we give to these boys around sex and intimacy, right, is, you know, you can have sex with as many as you want, but fall in love with none, right? What we do with feelings: don't be a wimp, don't be a girl, don't be too emotional. And so we just, you know, we shut them down bad.
We kill their souls.
We kill their souls. We
Mm-hmm.
do.
It's heartbreaking. It really is.
Right.
It is.
And I have had
later
so many, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Dee.
I've had so many men, you know, up to, over my span of my career, but also like just recently in the last week, talk about how their dads in particular would call them, you know, sissies, pussies, you know, girls. I'm like, horrible, horrible things.
That's just terrible. I mean, really, when you look at a little 5-year-old boy now, look at a little 7-year-old, and when you like do that, and then you know, they shut down. They have to emotionally shut down, because it's the only way they can't feel. They have to block those feelings. It's the only way they can survive it. Then they grow up to be men, and we're like, what the hell? Like, I want you to be connected with me. And the men are like, what are you talking about?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like, also the, you know, so we're talking about from young, but then you even get to like, Brene Brown had, in one of her books, she talks about the guy who's telling her the story about when he's like in high school football, and like the coach tells him to go in, but like it's this line of like these big, you know, bruisers, and he has this just little hiccup of hesitation, and the coach was like, look, if you don't think you can go out there and do, you know, do what you need to do, then get yourself back, and you're not on the team. And I mean, it was like it was just like a second.
Yeah.
So it's like, even like you can't even do that as a man, right. You know, it's a boy growing up. Like, how horrible.
And still have the respect of you fellow boys and men, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the things that you were saying, Lisa. I think Terry Real also says it, the idea that this happens so early,
So early.
you know, like there's things that are happening to girls as they become women. But some of the worst happens in their preteen years. But this is like 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really sad. It's so sad. And then on top of that, the other thing is patriarchy.
Yep.
And patriarchy, from, you know, just the whole message is that men are wiser, stronger, more important than women. And so that totally feeds into the dismissiveness unconsciously, right? You know, oh, girls that, you know, throw like a girl, you act like a girl. All of that is a way of diminishing. And so when boys grow up and become men and high school kids, and there's this underlying unconscious dismissiveness of females that is just prevalent, and
Yep.
you don't even know about it, you know, you don't even recognize it. And so that's another piece. And if you do really respect women and really check in, you better watch who you're hanging out with, because you better be with other men and boys who are doing the same, or man, you're going to be stomped on for that.
Oh yeah.
All right, so what's the cost? What's the cost? These are the 5 big things we're seeing again and again and again from men all over the world. What's the cost? What is this costing them?
Well, we can start with their health. I think it costs them their health. I think they bottle up so much and don't know how to deal with their feelings and care for themselves any more than they know how to care for their partners.
Yeah.
So they have more disease. They have more heart disease. They die younger.
Yeah. And mental health. There's a lot of depressed men who, but here's the irony about that. You can't talk about it because that's not manly.
That's right. So
Right?
they drink, right?
Or sex addicts, or, you know, drugs or whatever. They self-medicate.
Right. Work. Yeah. Work more.
Work, yes, work, huge.
Yes, workaholics.
Huge
Yeah.
escape, distraction from everything.
Right. They're losing marriages. And if they're not losing their marriages, they're distant in their marriages, and many of their marriages are not going well, whether they know it or not. That's the interesting thing. Whether, you know, some of them don't know until the wives actually are like literally walking out the door, and the men are like, what happened? Right. And there's no, like, they're like isolated, even though they're surrounded by people, they're isolated. Like, you know, and I've said this before, I've had men where they literally have been separated from their wives for 3 weeks, and their friends don't even know. And so when they go out with their friends, they're just hanging out, playing basketball or doing this stuff, but they're not actually talking. And I like that, to me, is just heartbreaking. The loneliness of that. They come home all by themselves into this little apartment, and their friends have no idea. It's really sad. Have you guys seen the show A Million Little Things?
Oh, I love that.
No.
Oh, it's a show about men and friendship.
Yeah.
And the opening scene is it's a group of 4 men?
Oh, men.
4 men who are best friends. The opening scene is one of the men commits suicide.
Wow.
And none of them have any idea. Well, one commits suicide while the other one is taking a handful of pills. He's trying to commit suicide. He puts all the pills in his mouth, gets a call, and he's like, what's this about? And they said, our friend just killed himself. And then he spits out all of his pills. And none of those 4 knew anything. And it's all about men, how they don't talk and they don't share, and, you know.
They just play basketball.
Yeah, that's what they did.
I also think it ruins, or at least doesn't help create relationships with your kids.
Yes.
You know, that I hear so many of, like, well, I don't really know. My kid doesn't talk to me. They always talk to my wife and, you know, or partner and that kind of stuff. And so just that total disconnect from everyone. So not just the friends, not just from their spouse, but from their children, probably from their sister and whoever. It's like it seeps into all relationships.
Yeah.
It goes back to the first thing, communication, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
They don't communicate with anyone,
Mhm.
not just their wives.
Mhm.
Okay, so those are some tremendous costs. So what's the turnaround? What do men need to do different in order to show up with a grounded, powerful strength, not an aggressive strength? You're not going to be the big kahuna. You're not going to be like, all about you. You're actually going to, how do you show up where you win in this? And so does everybody around you. How can we have this be a win-win for everyone?
Well, I think you said an interesting thing, Lisa, when we were just talking before all this, is that there's things you need to add and things you need to remove.
Right.
Yeah.
I like that idea,
Yeah.
that it's both. And so one of the things I think is recognizing, which is going to be hard with all of these things we were talking about, but that your partner, women in your life, if your spouse is a woman, they are different from you, but they're what they have going on is equally as valid as important
Yeah.
as anything you have going on.
Yeah.
So I think it's adding that perspective that it's okay. Like these people around you are not little clones of you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They have their own thoughts, their own feelings, their own way of doing things.
Yeah.
And it's equally valid to yours.
And
Yeah.
what you can take away is this idea that you know better, that
Mhm.
you have the right answers, that
Mhm.
you can fix it,
Mhm.
that it's up to you to fix it,
Mhm.
that it's not all about you. That you can take away.
It's not all about you.
Not all about you.
Love that. Love that. The other one, be the safest person in your home. Your family should know unequivocally that when they are around you, you have their back and they have nothing to fear. And too many families are walking on eggshells around the men in their homes. And too many children are scared shitless that their dad's going to lose it, or wives are scared shitless that, their husband's going to come at them in some way angrily or shame them or be hot. You don't want that legacy. You have to be the safest person in your home. That is going to be a spiritual practice, right? And when you think of removing violence in your home, and I'm not talking physical violence, that is an obvious. Emotional violence, the heat, that goes not only for you, it also goes for everybody else in your home. You got to create a new normal, right? Radical safety should be in this home.
And radical respect.
And
They said that before, and I thought that was a beautiful way of thinking about what your goal should be.
Yeah.
The radical respect for everybody in your house.
Yeah. And radical respect is not, we're all equal. That's what it is literally like, you know what? Your words are just as important as mine. Your feelings matter just as much as mine. I respect your thoughts. I respect you as a human being. Like, radical respect is very different than, I know we all should be equal. It's showing up in that minute to minute interaction that shows that you care what I say, you care what I feel, you care what's going on for me.
I want to bring this up because we didn't mention it before at all, but I was thinking about Barack Obama's book.
Mhm.
And it is so clear when he is thinking about his career and his running for president, how much he considers his wife,
Yeah.
how he thinks about how she's going to react. Every step of the way, he's thinking about her as well.
Mhm.
It's not just about his ambitions.
Yeah. And let me just say to that takes courage. That is radical respect. That is radical equality. That is not him being pussy whipped. That is not him being, oh, she's controlling him. That is about you got married, it became two in a relationship, So now this is about, okay, we both have to do whatever we can to make sure this relationship is going to work great for both of us. That takes courage and manliness, quote unquote.
Strength, real strength.
Real strength, honest strength. Love that.
Mhm.
The other, going along with, what do you add and what do you remove? So some of the statements you can remove is, you're too sensitive. That's silly. That doesn't make any sense. All of those dismissive statements, remove them from your repertoire. You should not be saying, how do you think? That's crazy. That's, you shouldn't feel that. Remove all those. Remove all of those statements.
And what you can add are more emotions, because many men only know anger. That's the one legitimate emotion that they feel is safe for them to have.
Mhm.
And you have so many more feelings in there if you can begin to check in with yourself.
Mhm.
And be open to the idea that they don't make you weak, they just make you more of a man.
And more human.
Exactly.
More human. And instead of saying, you're too sensitive, you want to get curious. Oh, so tell me why you are sad about that. What happened? Tell me what you're thinking. Tell me what that was like for you. Right?
Mhm.
You're sad. I'm so sorry you're sad. Come here. Would you like a hug? That sounds hard.
Or would you rather just talk about it?
Do you want to talk about it?
Mhm.
Those are all the things that you can replace. And if you don't know what to say, you just say, honey, I don't know how to respond, but I hear you and I can see you're really upset.
And I just want to say, curiosity is those kinds of questions. What was it for you? How is it affecting you? What is the meaning for you? So curiosity questions are about the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And curiosity is not having an agenda to ask a bunch of questions to get the person to look at it like you do. Don't you think that isn't, like, those aren't curiosity questions? They're questions, but they're interrogation questions. They're not curious questions. And so kind of that idea of what might that be like for her, that other person, rather than, oh, well, this is what I think, or this is what I think you should do, or this is where anytime you're kind of making it self-referent,
Mm-hmm.
then you're not being curious.
Yeah.
Yeah, be really interested. Be really interested where the other person is coming from, as if you just met them for the first time.
Yeah. Like you're a reporter trying to get the story. What's it like for you? Let me walk a mile in your shoes for a moment. Yeah.
And that's a gift. That's actually something that you are giving to the relationship when you do that.
If you want to be fixing, this is the new fix.
I love that. So Dee, I think earlier you also said one of the things to remove, I can't remember if it was Dee or Arlene, remove the competition.
Steve?
Yeah, the idea that you're speaking, so I have to speak, or I have to win, or it's your way, or it's my way, or all of that is about competition.
Mm-hmm.
And there are places for competition, but in your relationship, that's not one of the places. And especially in terms of really getting to know and understand your partner. Was one of the things in this book I was reading about listening, was one of the things that gets in the way of communication, asking curious questions, competition, all of those sorts of things, is deciding, I know you. I know everything about you. We've been married for 15 years, so I know. It's kind of like, yeah, that's a death knell. because you're just going to keep that pattern of being competitive or not being curious or being dismissive. Mhm.
You want to add, you're right, I did that, I'm sorry,
Right.
right? I'll fix that. And you want to add that without any rationalizations, explanations, justifications. It's simply, you know what, you're right, I forgot, I'm really sorry, let me do it now. Or I can, yeah, I did snap at you, I'm really sorry, I'm going to be working on that. And, I'm realizing how hard it is for me to get get my anger under control. I'm going to work that. So start bringing in accountability. I will tell you that one of the most courageous things in the world is being accountable. And
Absolutely.
if you're able to do that, you are far above many. So get that back in check.
And if, I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I hear, especially women spouses say, if he would just say he did it,
Yeah.
like if I just didn't have all this defensiveness and all this other kinds of stuff, like that would mean so much to me.
Yes.
Yeah. I have a couple people who right now are really looking at divorce because of defensiveness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because remember, like defensiveness, you can't fix a problem if you can't hear it and you're not willing to solve it and you're not willing to own it, it can't be fixed. So basically what you're telling your partner is, this is it. You've got what you've got. And if you're not happy, move on. Well, many of them are moving on. And so you got to be really careful about that. It doesn't take strength to be like, I didn't do that. I didn't do that. I never do that. That's not my, it takes incredible strength to be able to be humble enough to be honest. And you don't just randomly say, yeah, I did that. I did that. I did that. You honestly, if you did it, you own it. If you didn't, you don't own something you didn't do, but you got to slow yourself down enough to take a humble look and then find the courage and the strength to own it when you do it.
And I'm sorry is not owning it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I say you have to have a reflective version of that. You're right. Like you were saying, Lisa, you're right. I did that. I'm working on it. I'm working on it in this way.
And this is how it impacted you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And because just, I'm sorry, like I have, again, partners on the other side being like, if I hear I'm sorry again, like I'm just going to throw my hands up and scream.
Well, it becomes another way of dismissing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, and
that's one of the covert way of dismissing.
Well, and some will even say, I'm sorry you felt that way.
Yeah.
I'm sorry you see it that way.
One, right?
I'm
Yes.
sorry you didn't like that, right? Like that is total dismissiveness and like total lack of accountability.
Right.
It's really
a good book for men to read about this is Harriet Lerner's Why Can't You Apologize?
Oh,
Something
good.
like that. Because she talks about all those things where someone thinks they're being apologetic, but they're just infuriating.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
well, and I think, and what you can add, instead of if you're really interested in doing this, you would ask your partner if you're not really sure why they're reacting that way or that you did what they're saying. You can ask them, well, what is it about what happened that made you feel that way? What did you hear? What did I do that you took it that way? Like that's taking the curiosity and really wanting to know what the other person's experience was.
Right. All right. And then the last thing for GPS is, let's talk about sex. So remove the idea that your wife or your partner owes you sex. You are not owed sex. Getting married did not mean like you owe me sex. Getting married was, I love you, I want to spend my life with you, and being sexual is a way that we are another way we're going to connect. It is not owed. The other thing to remove about sex is don't make everything sexual. Don't make everything about you. Don't just go in and start groping your wife because you feel like you should be able to do that. That's a turnoff. And the more you pressure and pressure and pressure for sex, or you complain about not having sex, or you throw this big, mood out because she says no, the more you're going to push her away and push her away so that she doesn't want to have sex. So that's what you're going to remove. What do they want to add for sex?
Well, I think one of the things is adding intimacy. We talked about that. Intimacy, again, in and out of the bedroom. That is one of the things that intimacy happens in many different ways. One of them can be sexual, but if you don't have the others, and you're also not intimate in the bedroom, then your partner's not going to want to do that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And even
So do all the things that we talked about before will help you have a better sex life.
right.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're in the bedroom, pay attention to her needs as well, not just yours. It's not just about, a means to an end.
Mm-hmm.
So take care of her, ask her what she wants, be connected in that sexual, experience. Because
And take out the idea that she must have an orgasm or you can't be okay.
right.
In that idea of asking her what she wants in
Yeah.
that moment, like the pressure of no, until you have an orgasm, we're not done. That's about you. That's not about your partner,
Right.
kind of thing. The other thing is, inside or outside the bedroom is the context. Like, is this one of the ways in your bedroom that it's kind of like, are you setting up the candles? Are you like, what are you doing to create a context of that? Have you had a conversation about, or ways that you guys come up with to let each other know, where do you feel sexually in any particular evening, or that sort of thing? And then, like you said, don't come up and grope your wife while she's making dinner, or your partner. It's like, that's intrusive. It feels very violating. And
Objectifying.
yeah, objectifying. And so it's the idea of, can you just touch your partner sweetly, maybe even sensually, but it doesn't have to go someplace.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Yeah. So men, I think that's a big one. I see so many women in my office where now they're afraid to hug their husbands, because if they just hug them, the husbands are going to want to go to sex. And so if every interaction, every physical interaction, whether it's a kiss or a hug or holding hands or anything, you're going to immediately go to sex, she's going to stop doing any type of physical connection. So you want to be able to, again, you want to be safe. You want to show her that you can handle it. You're not a dog in heat. You can handle being around her without having to be sexual. And that's big. And because then she might start chasing you, and she might start wanting to be, she might be the one going after you. So give her space and room to be the chaser a little bit sometimes.
Also remember that you're not a 13-year-old boy who is trying to always get to the end goal here.
Right.
Being a man is not that.
Yeah.
Scoring is not the idea here. This is not about scoring and getting there. At 13, okay, maybe that was what you did and your peers thought was the coolest thing. It's not cool now.
Yeah.
And if I think one of the other things we had talked about is, if you learn intimacy in a variety of areas, then this isn't the only area that you're going to get this sense of connection.
Yeah.
And so then it becomes a part of a whole rather than the only thing.
Absolutely.
Right.
I was going to say that. I was thinking that.
Sorry.
Absolutely. Well, you had no way of knowing, because you can't read my mind.
But I love that message because men, you deserve to be happy. You deserve to be connected. You deserve to have, a great marriage. You do deserve to have a wife or a husband who is totally into you.
Mhm.
And in order to do that, you've got to be a connected partner. You've got to be involved.
Mhm.
You deserve to be a full human being,
Yeah. Yep.
a rich, full of experience and feeling human being.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And when the men, around you are, dissing you or saying, oh, you would look at him being all nice to his wife or whatever their comments are, stand up to that bullshit. Like, just stand up, because it's not helping you. It's not helping other men. You deserve to really enjoy life and be loved and be connected, and stop with all these crazy messages that other people are giving you. Don't take it in, and don't send it to other men or your boys. Okay. So, challenge. This time we're going to start with a challenge to men, and we are going to give the women a challenge too. So, challenge to men. Who wants to take it?
I can do that. So what we would like you to do is get aware of the move you make. We've given you these 5 areas. And so it's looking, what do I do? How do I do it? What does it look like for me? And maybe you do it in one area or several areas. Like we talked about, some of them are connected. So it's really paying attention. If you don't know, you're not sure what your move is, then tune into complaints from your partner, from other women in your life, women close to you. What are the kinds of feedback that you're getting from all of these people around you? And that will help you tune in to what your move is.
Awesome. And then when you figure that out, watch that for a week, 2 weeks, then choose one of the little steps that we've talked about on this and start implementing it.
Right. Mhm.
All right. Arlene, you want to take it for women?
Sure. Women, don't disappear. Regardless of what happens, show up, stand up, have your voice. And remember that whatever comes of it, you're doing it for you. You may not be able to change your partner, change his behavior, but you can change yours. And every time you stand up, you're building more muscle.
Love that. The one other thing for women that I would say is get conscious of all the ways you play into these 5 things that men do, and you shrink and you shut down, and start recognizing how you're doing that, and so that you don't have to disappear anymore. Check that out. All right. So again, women, if you have men in your life that you've been trying to kind of get the message through and they're not hearing you, pass this podcast along. If you have brothers, fathers, sons who you think it could be beneficial for, send it along. Men, if you feel like this podcast was helpful in any way to you, pass it on to your friends. We are all hoping for and committed to creating a better world for men and women, because we all deserve to be happier and more connected. All right, so there you go. Leave comments if you have any. We'd love to hear any feedback. Leave questions. If we have any questions, we'll do our best to get back to you. And until next time, this is the Rising Podcast for Women, and go out and be awesome people in your relationships and in your lives. Thank you again for joining us this week. And always remember, you have the power to change the world for women by changing how you walk in it. I challenge you to choose one way to stand in your grounded, powerful strength this week and be part of the ripple of change.